and having a chance to talk with track announcer of Golden Gate currently, Matt Dinerman, who was the Emerald Downs track announcer through that incredible run of Barkley and Mach 1 rules. Matt, first of all, thanks for joining us and jumping on here, but wanted to reach out to you and get your thoughts on this. And I really haven't thought about how I want to do this interview. But now that I think about it, I think what I want to do is I want to start with this. So before we go any further, we're talking, of course, about Barkley and Mach 1 rules. If you're this far into where you found this video, you've read quite a bit about what we're talking about. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull up, what was it, the Seattle Slew Stakes. And Matt, this is one of those that at the end you could just tell Matt turned from track announcer to fan. Let's listen to this. Watch and listen first.
We're ready to go. They're off to the Seattle Slew Stakes. Barkley had an alert beginning and goes out towards the front now. They're just crawling along in the opening 16th here, and Barkley has the lead from William Crotty. Mach 1 rules, pretty keen to go on there, is tugging at Leslie Mowing. Takes third as they enter the turn, then Party for One, and Super Hot is the trailer. So William Crotty rides the rail to the front, Barkley right outside of him, and a new target here for Mach 1 rules. Usually Barkley's behind Mach 1 rules, and today he is in front of him, so Barkley will be the target for Mach 1 rules as they move on to the backstretch. There's a space of 3.5 lengths to Party for One, and Super Hot takes his spot at the back of the pack. So they're up the backstretch here, and there goes Barkley now. Barkley tugs Javier Matias to the front, and now Leslie Mowing says go with Mach 1 rules, and these two are right together as they head towards the half mile, and Mach 1 rules takes control. Mach 1 rules sticks his neck in front, Barkley right on the inside of him, and the two favorites hit the far turn, 3.5 lengths clear of William Crotty, 3.5 more to Party for One, and Super Hawk as they round the turn. Mach 1 rules going great guns up front, leads a half length, now he's being pushed along. Barkley down at the rails, still second. He's already being pushed along as well. And Mach 1 rules starting to get away at the top of the stretch. Mach 1 rules leads. Barkley's angling outside, and here he comes. And Barkley's asked to go, but Mach 1 rules goes on. Barkley on the far outside's trying to get him. Here's the match we've been waiting for. Mach 1 rules digs in. Barkley trying his heart out. He just can't get there. He's finding his best stride late. And here comes Barkley on the outside. Barkley and Mach 1 rules to the wire, and Barkley did it again. Barkley wins it.
That's unbelievable. I mean, watching that race, at the quarter pole, Mach 1 was 1-9 and Barkley was 99-1. I still can't believe that he ran that horse down after all that. Wow.
You know, I think there's the. I don't know if you couldn't hear your call on your end. Were you able to hear it?
Oh yeah, on the gallop out a little bit.
Yeah. So you know, again, like you said, how did he win that? I mean, because as you were calling it in the race, it was not his usual race to begin with, and he goes to the lead and gets passed. Who waits then for another quarter, half, whatever it was to, okay, now I'll just go to the outside and here we go again.
And Javier Matias, he told me, because I asked him about that race, I think the week after it was run, and he said he's an interesting horse to ride, Barkley, because he's very intelligent. He knows where the wire is, and what's interesting about him is that sometimes Javier would say, I'd ask him, and he would dictate when to go, not me. He'd say, hold on, buddy, I'm not ready to go yet, but I'll give it to you in just a little bit here. So, I mean, he's a competitor. He was a competitor, not to say Mach 1 rules wasn't, because he was. But yeah. Barkley just, he had that charm about him, and that's part of the reason why he was so lovable for the fans. I mean, like he said, just watching that, you have to smile at that. I mean, that's unbelievable.
That was such a great capper of those three races. That was in 2016. Going back to 2015, and in the story, we talk about how careful Howard Belvoir, the trainer, was with Barkley all through his career. And his two-year-old, he ran an allowance and got left at the gate kind of, and then quickly went up on the outside and rolled to an easy 3.5 length win, and was about 4 or 5 wide the whole time, I think, in that one. Came back and won the Emerald Express. And then Howard goes, "Oh, that's it for this year," and turned him out and said nope. And then got him ready for 2016, ran that allowance race, and then started with the Auburn Handicap. It was the Auburn Handicap, the Coca-Cola, and then that one, the Seattle Slew. Matt, tell, and that all led to the Derby, right? Was that the trail to the Derby that year? I believe, yeah, it was.
Emerald Derby,
yeah. So, but that 3 in a row there. Let's start with the Auburn. What were you thinking? I mean, as you prepare to call races like this, you obviously do a lot of homework, no doubt about it. And you were, when you were up here, you were on the backside as well, and you got to know not only the horses but all the people around them as well, which really makes your call so much more genuine. I guess is the word that I'm looking for. Really ties you into what you're doing. But so you had a good handle on that. So when you saw this series coming up, and you knew these two would likely run at each other, but I think the Auburn, was that the first time they met? Do you recall off the top of your head?
That was the first time they met, and I remember thinking, Mach 1's just got a little bit more speed in him, and I just said, it's going to be hard for Barkley to run a horse like him down. That's what I was thinking, but I know Howard always liked Barkley, and he had been training lights out apparently heading into the Auburn. He'd always been training well. And he had a big heart. I mean, he put it on display as a 2-year-old even. I mean, obviously he was still learning things, but after a couple races, it was pretty apparent that this horse wanted to win. And I honestly believe that half of those wins just came from heart alone. Really, I do. Not to say he wasn't talented, because he was, but he just had that competitive nature about him. And even in the paddock, you see him, he did a little zenyatta dance every once in a while. I mean, he wanted to take command. He was the alpha male, just watching at him on the track, and he knew he was the goods.
So that one came up, then came the Coca-Cola. Did your mind change at that point then?
I think it did a little bit, yeah. I believe I picked Mach 1 rules again, saying, you know what, he might be able to get the first jump on this horse. Let's try him again here. And Barkley beat us again, the top pick anyway. But I think it was apparent once he ran down Mach 1 rules once, because Mach 1 rules was a little more flashy at the time, if I recall correctly. Just watching his races, very visually impressive. Barkley was one of those horses that would just do enough to win and just grind it out. So I think any handicapper, any racing fan will tell you a lot of people are sort of more attracted to those big wins and emphatic victories, and that's why we saw a lot of people give attention early to Mach 1 rules and say, what, Barkley's going to have to work extra hard for this one, but he knew what he needed to do. And by that second race, going head-to-head, Barkley beat him again, and at that point I was thinking, boy, this could turn into a really cool rivalry here. I mean, that was when I think it came in everybody's heads. This isn't just two horses running. This is a rivalry that could go down in history if they keep running this way.
Well, the first one, the Auburn, was 6.5, I believe, and Mach 1 rules was the favorite. And like the betting public said, okay, we're going to go a mile this time in the Coca-Cola. We're going to stick with Mach 1. Mach 1 again was the betting favorite going in that race, and again that time his biggest victory at the time over Mach 1 by a short neck, I think, too, on that. And then going into the mile and the 16th Seattle Slew that we just saw, I think there's a lot of people that did change their mind. Clearly on Barkley, he was the favorite, but no one thought that they would see that race that we just saw out of him. That still was a mind blower, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was calling the race, and I sort of thought, okay, here we go. Mach 1's just sort of going to draw off. I thought this would be a little bit of a more competitive race, And it's interesting you bring up the second time in the Coca-Cola real quick that Mach 1 did go off favor. And I think part of that, too, I just want to note this, is that Barkley was a little horse, and he's really stocky. So he's almost built like a quarter horse almost. So I think a lot of people also looked into that and said, well, maybe he might just be one of these sprinter type, maybe a late running sprinter. And once he went 2 turns and he'd run down Mach 1 rules twice, it was pretty apparent that this horse could go head and head with Mach 1 and was probably at the time better. But in the Seattle Sleuth, July 3rd, 2016, I think there were close to 15, 20,000 people because that was the fireworks evening.
Yeah.
And I remember calling that race, and no disrespect to any other race I've called, but that was the most exciting, thrilling race I've called in my entire life. I could feel calling the race as they came head and head in the final 16th, the floor of the booth shaking because the people below were cheering so much. I mean, it felt like it was the Kentucky Derby affirmed in Alley Dar. It really felt like that on track. And, that was when the emotion in the call came out. But, I mean, you want to talk about a horse with not just talent, but all heart. You just watch that video. And I remember taking off the headset, and I was like red in the face because I remember looking in a mirror and I was red in the face because I just was so into the race, but I had a huge smile on my face and everybody was cheering, and it was sort of mixed emotions because I liked Frank Lucarelli and Roy Schaefer, REV Racing, the folks who campaigned Mach 1 rules, and I actually felt sort of bad for them because they must have said, "Are you kidding me?" Yeah. But, and Barkley went in the winner's circle, and there was just a roar from the crowd, and even though a lot of these people are probably $2 bettors, I think they were able to understand just how cool of an athlete they witnessed in Barkley. I think people can really get a gauge on that. And I think even if you're a beginner, I think people are there on track saying that is a cool horse.
Yeah. It just is it's a different feel when you have something like that. And it's hard to capture in horse racing. These guys come along and you have a lot of movement. You have horses come in and out. And so to have a horse like this, 20 starts, all at Emerald Downs. Hasn't left the state since he shipped up from the Keeneland sale, I think, and has been here ever since. And just a lot of great followers and stuff that go with that. That is so impressive. Then, we did talk with Frank as well, and Frank goes, he says, I love Howard Belver. I love his stable. I love everything out. And I told Howard, I says, I am a huge fan of Barkley, except when I'm running against you. And he goes, and would you quit punching me in the stomach? He said, in the Emerald Derby, he ended up coming up short in that. And that's when Lucarelli and Leslie Mawing at the time was riding Mach 1, changed their tactics and they wanted to stick with Barkley, later and try to force him wide. Unfortunately, it kind of backfired on him as Mach 1 ended up backing out at the top of the stretch and probably did cost Barkley the win. Was it opportunistic? I believe that ran him, that got up there.
Domenico and Mike Puich at the time, I think, anyway, when he was on track there. I think he was trained by Glenn Todd, if I remember correctly, up in Canada, opportunistic. And he was a good horse himself.
Yeah.
But I said after the race, after the Emerald Derby, I wish they had Trackus in the saddle towels to see how much ground loss Barkley actually lost. Because if you watch the head on, especially, I don't know if it's still up, but it's very telling. I mean, Leslie on Mach 1 definitely displayed some riding tactics there to try to intimidate Barkley. He must have been 5 and 6 wide on both turns. I mean, he was really wide and opportunistic, sort of rode the rail there on both turns, and he came up a neck in front of Barkley. And I think that sort of made the difference there. But, Mach 1 tried to rate and stick with Barkley, and he wanted, I remember talking to Leslie about the race. He wanted Barkley to be the target, and he figured, you know what, if Barkley doesn't see us coming, we might be able to get him. And that was sort of their thinking.
Yeah.
And it was good thinking, but unfortunately, I think for a mile and an eighth for Mach 1 was a little too far, and going wide probably didn't probably didn't help them either. But it didn't help Barkley either.
Well, you can't. Yeah. Well, yeah, but you can't blame them for trying to change tactics to try and figure out how to, be in front at the line,
Sure.
And they finally would. In Mach 1, it was interesting then. In 2017, there's no question that the Rising Star group, and Howard had their sights set on the mile. But there were a few bumps in there and didn't quite turn out the way. And Mach 1, that's when he started really coming. I thought, as good as he was back then, I thought he might even be a little better as a 4-year-old, or maybe even pushing a 5-year-old season there, whatever they were at that point. But when he ran off those 2 wins and then ran second in the mile, I thought that might have been the best stretch there for Mach 1 rules.
It was, and Isaias Enriquez took over the reins on Mach 1 rules, and I believe Leslie that year he went to Canterbury, if I remember correctly. So Isaias rode the horse, and he did a very good job, and Isaias fit Mach 1 like a glove, and we see sometimes that natural progression for horses from 3 to 4 years old. There were a lot of people also thinking, is Barkley one of these horses that peaked at 3 and he's not going to get any better? And Mach 1 has. There was a lot of speculation on that too, because Mach 1 beat him pretty handily twice in a row. One of those races, Barkley didn't get a good trip because Isaias rode the race to perfection and really didn't do anything that was deemed illegal by any means, but he did some race riding himself in one of those races there, and it cost Barkley. I think he got a little intimidated, and Mach 1 was push-button type of horse as a 4-year-old, and he was finding his best stride. And I think after he beat Barkley twice, a lot of people were saying, here's the Mach 1 that we were expecting at 3. And as you know, history tells that that's not the case, because Barkley had something to say about it, surprisingly.
It did. That takes us to 2018, and again, not it wasn't all fireworks and happiness. He ran into a horse named Riser, who gave him some problems, and one was because he kind of sucker punched him out of the gate almost in the one race, and cost Riser the win there, and he was dropped to 5th and moved to 4th. Barkley was moved up, but he had no shot in that race. But the other race, and I think that was the big concern, because that was the one. I think that was the Mount Rainier again. Was that the Mount Rainier? I think it was the Mount Rainier. And there was no front speed to be found to go with Riser. And if Riser was going to be allowed to sit out there by himself, I don't know if Barkley would ever be able to run him down.
I don't think Barkley would have been able to either. I think he needed the right setup. Riser was pretty much the opposite of Barkley as a racehorse, and I think they're trying to get Riser back to the races, believe it or not. He's been off for a while, but he was a brilliantly fast horse, Riser, a great flash. He went to the lead, could deal with pressure just fine, but he had a really high cruising speed. And Barkley was one of these horses. He didn't always break that great. He'd settle and make a run, even though he did have a little bit of tactical speed. He wasn't a horse that was sprinty like Riser was, and Riser could not only be fast as a sprinter, but he could carry it going a mile and a mile 16th, and Barkley didn't really stand a chance against him. But luckily for Barkley, he didn't have to face Riser, because Riser came up with an injury before the mile, and things set up for Barkley. I think going into the mile, if the field was big, looking back, and there was a fast pace, I think Barkley probably could have beat Riser, but I think that he would have needed the right setup to do that.
He would have needed the right setup, and I don't think you were going to get a big field, because Riser probably was the one that should have scared everyone off, and he's out, and you still only ended up with 6 horses.
Right.
So, I think that would have – but, yeah, and again, Barkley – all closers need – I don't care how good a closer you are, if you have a pace horse out there that is left alone and is not pressured, you're going to – merry-go-round all day long. It's just not going to change much, and so you needed someone, and that was the danger there. And so I think people wanted to see that matchup again, but I'll tell you what, when I watched that mile race and he is behind horses and then shifts out from the rail to get outside the 2 front runners and just inside of Alert Bay, and just explodes from between horses. He had no fear being on the rail or between horses. That was one of his trademarks, wasn't it, Matt?
Absolutely. I mean, he was all racehorse, and he was a win at all costs type of horse. So he was not scared to come up the rail, not scared to split horses. Very intelligent horse that knew exactly where he was at and seemed to have a good sense of where the other horses were at and what he could and couldn't do. And Javier would ride him very well in most of these races and was not scared to make those types of moves as a rider, knowing that Barkley would say, if you want me to go through there, I can. But before the mile, I remember telling people, I made Barkley the top pick, and I said, this is a pretty competitive race, but Howard's going to have Barkley as cranked up as he can have him. And I think this horse is going to win on heart alone, because now that Riser's out of the picture, I think he can beat all these horses. And I don't care where he's at on the track. I know that Cabraj was in the race for Jeff Metz, and a lot of people were thinking he might be able to steal it on the lead. And I said, I don't care. He's going to get an easy lead. Riser's not in there, and Barkley's going to run him down. I really believe that in my heart watching the race. And I flew up there to watch it.
That's right. You weren't you didn't get a chance to call that race.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what happened. Did you happen to get a chance to see his last race where this last Thursday?
I did. Yeah.
And so I talked to Howard about this a little bit. And when you look at his past performances, his 20 races, there's only one jockey on there. And I had to wonder, because, it wasn't like he stopped and was pulled up or anything. Right. It was just something wasn't right. And Javier could sense that. And I'm wondering if it's one of these types where you're maybe shipping your horse, to different tracks and different riders are on it, and they may be on it for the first or second time, only a few times. And that same situation comes up. If they just deem it, he needs some urging. He needs to be, pushed here or whatever, because, if there's any question of what Howard thought of this horse, in 2019, he ran an allowance race and then shut him down for the year because he felt, he told Joe Withy, he felt just a tiny little bump on the tendon, and that, you couldn't even see. He says, but I felt it, and no, I wasn't going to risk it. Down he goes. And so for him to even put him in that race last Thursday, Howard had to be convinced 100% he was 100% healthy. Right. But to have Javier on him and then feel that, you could see, and Joe actually pointed it out, if you watch about the quarter pole, and Barkley actually passes a horse in that race on the far turn. He and Elliott Bay are kind of moving together. Elliott Bay is just in front, and they pass a horse. And then about a quarter pole, Joe says, Javier changes his hands. You can see him, and then you can just see it. And then by the 8th pole, you can see him rise up just a little bit off the saddle. By the 16th pole, he's up and he's easing him in. But you have to wonder, if it's anyone else on him at that time, would they have known him? Would they have known that just wasn't right?
Possibly. Javier, as we mentioned earlier, is a very good horseman. Not only does he just get on the horse and ride the horse, there are certain jockeys that are probably like that, but many of the good ones and the great ones, in fact, all of them, they're horsemen or horsewomen. And with Javier, he's very good at getting on a horse and knowing how much that horse can give. And if there's something a little off, he's very good at feeling that. And especially with Barkley, he'd ridden him in all his races.
Yeah.
He must have felt that Barkley wasn't the same Barkley we all knew and loved. And I remember watching the race live when it was on TVG, and I was talking to my dad on the phone during the race because we were talking, and, Barkley's about to run. I want to watch him. And even at the half-mile pole, I said, you know what? He doesn't have that same energy level, that same kick out of the gate. He just doesn't look like he's the same horse the way he's running right now. And then at the quarter pole, I said, I think Javier is just going to let him coast in here because it doesn't look like it was his day. And sure enough, he eased him to the line. He crossed the line okay and everything. But I told my dad, I said, there's something that's not quite right there. You could see it. And Javier could definitely feel it. And I think Javier did a great job taking care of Barkley. After everything Barkley's done, Javier, that's like his kid. He wants to make sure he comes home safe. And I think Barkley probably took care of himself if he himself felt that there was any little thing that was wrong. Like I said, he's a pretty intelligent horse, and he probably took care of himself too.
No, exactly. And that was my point, the horsemanship and just, the knowingness that that relationship that Javier had with Barkley. I'm not sure anyone knew him better than him. in the end. Maybe probably Howard would be the only other one who could just sense something wasn't right or whatever, and said, that's just not wrong. This is an interesting fact. I don't know if you know this, but Howard's been in this game for I don't know how many years. What, 50 now? 40, 50 years?
At
Got to be
least
50.
40, probably 50. Yeah.
This will be his first horse that he'll retire that'll go to stud in his career.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
First one. And so
That's pretty cool.
they're excited. He says, I got 3 mares that are in line first. He's had several calls, many calls already.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, and is it Munnings?
Munnings, the sire.
Yeah, the sire. He says that's not up here in the Northwest, so that could be a really neat new line for choice up here in Washington. So there's still could be Barkley too could be on the way,
and he's actually out of a Medaglia d'Oro mare. So there's some good Kentucky pedigree there for Barkley and for Howard to attract. Get Barkley to get some mares to start off his breeding career. And I mean, he's got pretty much what you're looking for in a stallion, especially a regional stallion. He's got pedigree. He's got speed. He could stretch that speed. He won from, I believe, 4.5 furlongs when he broke his maiden to 1 1/16, and he probably should have won at 1 1/8. And
he ran 1.5 miles there.
Yeah,
right?
he actually ran the Pacific Classic distance. Yeah, so I'm really happy for everybody involved: Rising Star, Vicky Potter, Howard, Javier, Barkley, of course, and it's a great story. I mean, he had the tenacity and the brain smarts to go with it. I mean, you watched his races. I wanted to point this out too. If you really watch his races at his best, look at about the 16th pole where he goes for the win. He sticks his neck out, he gets low, and he changes stride. And that tells you all you need to know about the tenacity and the determination he had to win. You can see clearly his feet start to quicken a little bit. He knew that wire was coming. I mean, he's just an unbelievable racehorse. And a lot of fans just, I think, love that about him, love that distinctive white blaze. And I marketed him as the White Blazed Wonder, and a lot of people, especially on Twitter, gravitated towards that. He was the hometown hero.
Oh, well, that's how we have him in the story there, Matt. So I didn't know that's where it came from, but I'm glad that we're able to include that. One last thing here. I think it's going to be really cool, and Howard and Frank are both open to it. They want to let Barkley heal up and feel a little better. But, Mach 1 is a pony horse for Lucarelli.
Yeah, I heard that.
So he's out there. So they're going to get the two together for a picture.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome.
So hopefully that's cool. That'll be really fun. Horse racing has never been more popular in some ways right now with people dying for any type of sports coverage, just excited to see any type of sports coverage and not having anything. And now, of course, everything is going. But before, I think there's been a whole new crowd that's been reinvigorated and to see racing. So we hope that can continue to carry over, not only here, but certainly at Golden Gate where you are. And, it's becoming a rougher and rougher business, Matt. And we just have to keep pushing out the good stories. And this is a great one, and you being kind enough to jump on means a whole lot to us as well. So we really appreciate it.
It's great to be on and chat with you, Paul. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I mean, if this rivalry was at a major track, the whole country in racing would be talking about this. I mean, for decades, like Affirmed and Alydar. I mean, that obviously it wasn't at that grade 1 level, but to watch those types of races gave you the thrill that you would watch in any type of major rivalry, and really in any rivalry in any sport, never mind just horse racing.
Well, I'll tell you what, the call again gave me goosebumps there at the end as Barkley, you had the call there of the Seattle Slew. And, so I added it up. Affirmed actually beat Alydar by about 2 lengths in the Derby.
Oh, okay.
And a half length in the Preakness, and then it was only the Belmont that was the head bob. So you're talking 2 3/4 lengths somewhere in there maybe, and maybe a quarter length difference for these two. That's how close it was. It was that Belmont race of Affirmed and Alidar times 3 in each one of those. That's what that came up to. So it was a great rivalry, and hopefully there's going to be some more coming up as racing continues. So, hey, continued success at Golden Gate, and once again, thank you much. Matt Dinerman, the current Golden Gate track announcer and former, and got to start here at Emerald Downs. We'll always be big Matt Dinerman fans up here in the Northwest, no question about that. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.